Hi, it's Scott Vogel on sex addiction. I'm going to share with you what I call the insanity of sex addiction. For a person to engage in behaviors that will definitely destroy their entire lives has to be insane. Why would somebody have multiple affairs that could end their marriage? Why would somebody go online and view pornography for hours and hours on end at work and risk their jobs? Why would somebody have anonymous, unprotected sex that could cause them to get diseases and eventually die? Why would somebody go online and arrange to meet an underage child for the purposes of having sex? All of that's crazy. It's insane. Now, sex addiction doesn't make sense to a lot of people who are unfamiliar with it, but it is a disease, and it is similar to other addictions like drugs and alcohol. The brain and the body become reliant on the chemicals released in the brain, and they become reliant on the addictive behaviors in a similar way to drugs and alcohol. Sex addiction is a growing problem due in large part to technology. Technology becomes addictive. You want more and more and more. Go anywhere now and you see people can't stay away from their phones in their hand. They're moving the screen back and forth and up and down, and they're constantly waiting for the next text message or sending the next message, or they're so addicted to it. And what's happening now is the accessibility to the internet, to pornography, to websites, to all types of different sexually addictive behaviors is becoming greater and greater. And then there's a thirst for more. Once somebody finds a little taste, a little something, then they want more. They get onto free sites and they find, ooh, I like this. And then they start paying for sites and the trouble begins, and it just gets more and more and more. And it's basically infinity defined. One can do a search for basically anything, any type of fetish, any kind of desire, and they'll find literally hundreds of thousands or millions of websites that can get them caught up for hours, days, weeks, months, years. That's insane for somebody to spend so much of their lives doing something that is not productive and that eventually will hurt them. Women's Day magazine had an article in it, and I like what it said. Just like with drugs, people use sex to numb pain. And that kind of sums up a lot about what the insanity of sex addiction is. When somebody is experiencing uncomfortable feelings in their lives, when they have challenges, stress, anxiety, pressure, and fear, a lot of people will turn to sex. Now, a lot of people may not think it's insane, but the damaging consequences that come with sex addiction are insane. When you numb the pain with a destructive activity that would seem strange to a healthy person, but a sex addict is already troubled, and now they found something that helps them feel good, which is their sexually addictive behaviors. Now, Deborah Lano is a certified sex therapist, and I like what she says. While it can work temporarily to alleviate these symptoms, an inappropriate or risky sexual encounter creates a negative feedback loop where, after the individual takes part in the behavior, there's a level of guilt they feel, and only thing that takes it away is more sex. So, what she's saying here is temporarily acting out sexually might help a person, but it creates a negative feedback loop. It might help for a short period of time to get the sexual release, but unfortunately, there's the guilt and the shame, and the only way that they can get rid of that guilt and the shame is to provide the body with more chemicals from sexually acting out again, and what Deborah calls it here is that negative feedback loop, or the cycle of addiction it's called, over and over and over again. And that's what makes it insane, is that you get into a loop and a cycle that just can't stop. Now, sex addiction, fortunately, is treatable. And there's 4 areas in which to treat sex addiction. First is 12-step programs, which are free and easily accessible both in face-to-face meetings and online meetings. There's individual therapy with certified sex addiction therapists and addiction counselors and mental health counselors. There's also inpatient treatment, which, costly as it may be, is one of the most effective ways to get help quickly. Then, of course, there's medications that help in conjunction with these three above to help some of the mood disorders that come along with sex addiction. So, the technology is really driving sex addiction these days, and a lot of people, children especially, are now being lured into the online world of pornography and turning into sex addicts at a young age. They're using sex to numb the pain of life. They haven't learned how to deal properly with pain, properly letting out anger and frustration and fear and anxiety and disappointment. And that's important to learn. They get into that negative feedback loop that Deborah Leno talked about, where they need the sex to numb the pain, and then they have the guilt and the shame, and they need the sex to numb that pain of the guilt and the shame, and it's constant. But as we talked about, there is treatment, 12-step programs, individual therapy, inpatient treatment, and medicines that will help people to deal with some of the other effects. Visit our YouTube channel on sex addiction for more videos on sex addiction and recovery from sex addiction. Also visit our blog at www.onsexaddiction.com. There you can find a free video explaining what sex addiction is, the 7 symptoms of sex addiction, the 4 traumas of sex addiction, the 4 faulty core beliefs set up by the traumas of sex addiction, and the solution, which is the 7 paths to recovery from sex addiction. You can also find more information about sex addiction and sex addiction recovery.